Welcome back to the Care Advocates, where we're advocating for you. Today, I have the distinct privilege of welcoming my co-host, Dr. George Ackerman, also known as Sharon's Sons George. How are you, George?
I'm good. Really just always an honor to be with you and talk about such important topics in the caregiving world. I find the show not just important, but it's really reaching an important audience around the world. So that's our goal. Obviously, I always say we don't want anything in return, but to caregivers to know you're never alone. I lost my mother due to Parkinson's, and unfortunately, I felt very alone as a caregiver. So this opportunity to really just talk about caregiving and how the important resources are for all diseases and areas is today. So thanks, Lance.
Absolutely. And you're also the founder of Together for Sharon. You want to talk about that for a moment for our viewers who may not be familiar with it?
Sure. Togetherforsharon.com was created after my mother passed. It was really just to keep her memory alive, and then somehow went from my hopes of two or three people viewing it to over 40,000. And I fight today in her memory, but for all those battling Parkinson's and the caregivers, which is why, again, we're here today, really more for the caregivers, because I feel there's many caregivers right now who are not lost but confused, don't know the resources, and really want to hear important topics as we both have discussed the last few months.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's always good to see you here, George. And now we have a special guest, Kimberly Jacobsen. Kimberly is an attorney, but also she is someone that is living well with Parkinson's disease. Welcome, Kimberly. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm so glad to join you both.
It's our pleasure. Kimberly, when I introduced you, I said, obviously you're an attorney, but you're also someone that is living well with Parkinson's disease. People that hear that may not understand what exactly that means. Can you explain for our viewers and listeners what living well with Parkinson's disease means?
Sure. So I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2020 during the pandemic, actually. And I was home. And of course, it's a shocking diagnosis. I was 51 at the time. I felt like I was relatively young to be diagnosed with this disease. I felt even more alone because I was kind of locked up and cooped up in my house, just with my immediate family. My parents are still alive, but it was really, that's a shocking kind of thing for anybody to have to deal with. And I spent some time certainly hiding. And luckily I was working full time, but remotely at the time. So it was a little bit easier to kind of hide. And then I said to myself, what am I going to do? I'm 51 years old. The science doesn't say I'm going to die of Parkinson's. I'm going to die with Parkinson's. I could very much live into my 80s and 90s. So how am I going to flip the script on this? How am I going to, say, yes, this terrible thing happened to me, but I want to be able to live well with it. And I want to be able to share with others how I'm living well with this disease. And so the idea came to me that I would do some social media. At the time, my kids were on their little iPads or their computers doing YouTube all the time. And I said, oh, I'll make some YouTube videos about my experience, because what I found was I was on a bunch of Facebook groups, and most of the people who get diagnosed with Parkinson's are not my age. They're probably in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And they were not being able to figure out the information they needed for various questions they had about the disease. And as an attorney, that's my expertise, finding information and sharing it. So I thought that, doing sort of video clips, video blogs would be helpful to people. And I was home and I was bored. And so I did the YouTube channel. I've been doing Instagram Reels, Facebook, and it's all under the hashtag Living Well with Parkinson's.
Living well. Now, I just wanted to follow up on that. Being an attorney, being a college educated person, being resourceful, you're used to finding information that you need also, not just sharing it. What resources did you find when you started this journey that you found to be helpful for you?
Well, one lucky thing is I was already doing civil rights litigation, which included disability discrimination. So I already had a lot of base knowledge about how this would affect me at work primarily. Other things I found helpful and useful, the Parkinson's Foundation has a lot of good information on their website about various issues. I mean, one issue that came up right away for me, which is actually the answer was disappointing, was that would I be able to get long-term care health insurance? And the answer is pretty much no. But there was information that I found about that. Michael J. Fox's incredible resources. on his website, on the foundation's website. Those were probably the two primary sources, Parkinson's specific, that I had looked at. And then, talking to people who had Parkinson's, or people like George who had a loved one who had Parkinson's, you kind of become part of a community, and it's really easy to share information.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Kimberly. George, how about we go back to you?
Thanks. I have two questions. One is if you could just tell us a little bit about what Parkinson's is, and then the second part is thankfully, in a way, I'm an attorney too, as you are. Maybe we could talk a little bit about being an advocate, because attorney is an advocate. It's literally the purpose of the job. But now somebody, which I always loved about you, and just so everyone knows, we are friends off here. I consider you family, and all that you do, you are a hero to me. And I know you always tell me not to say it, but it's true, and I can't help myself. But so important also is, what is it like being an advocate, but also being a person with Parkinson's? Very unique and really inspiring that you can manage, but also still be out there fighting.
Sure, and I always appreciate your kind words, George. So Parkinson's is a neurodegenerative disease, and that is a mouthful to say if you actually have Parkinson's disease, because sometimes words don't come as easily as I wish they would. And basically, most people think of it as a motor-related disease, and there are motor-related symptoms. I have a tremor in my left hand and my left arm, a little bit in my left leg. A lot of people, the physical tremor symptoms will start on one side and eventually, unfortunately, go to the other side. It can affect a lot of things. You think about it, if your brain's not working, it's like the engine of your car is not working, or really the computer of your car is not working. And so everything just kind of goes haywire. Your digestion, there's a lot of depression, anxiety associated with the disease, not just living with a chronic disease, but it actually, because your transmitters in your brain aren't working well, you're not getting the right amount of dopamine. And so it actually can make you sad. So there's a lot of apathy associated with the digestive problems. Sleep problems are really common. Not being able to sleep at night, being very fatigued and sleepy during the day, acting out dreams, nightmares. I could go on and on. In terms of the advocacy work, it just really comes very naturally to me because I still am working full time. I intend to work full time, at least for, until I'm ready to retire. And that's what I do on a daily basis. So it's a little bit different because I'm used to advocating for other people, but now I'm advocating for myself. And I think that advocacy can come in, it's a multi-layer thing. It could be all kinds of things that people do. For me, I like doing the social media videos, the TikTok videos, especially because I just think it's like a quick snippet. I could take 10 minutes out of my day. I could say something that I'm thinking about related to Parkinson's, and maybe someone out there will feel similarly or has a loved one who has Parkinson's, and it'll make them think, start thinking about things. There's advocacy work that I've done in terms of raising funds. There's advocacy work that folks are also doing in terms of changing the law. We got a big influx of money. President Biden signed the Parkinson's Act into law last year, and there's lots of research going on. So, I was a little part of that by contacting my legislators and trying to get them to get that bill signed. So there's all kind of ways folks can go do advocacy. They could really just even talk to friends to tell them about Parkinson's. There's a lot of stigma associated with this disease. It's kind of an embarrassing disease. You're shaking in public. You might not be able to talk well. And it's really easy to just say, I just don't want to be in public. I want to hide under covers. But what the science has shown is actually social engagement and being out in the community, engaging with people, makes your symptoms better. So just talking to people, telling them about the disease, trying to get the stigma away from the disease, that could be advocacy in itself.
I agree, and I think I still advocate. Obviously, it can't bring my mother back, but it helps me grieve today, still, even 5 years later. It also helps me because there has been so much positive out of the negative, like having individuals like you in my life. So thank you for those responses, and hopefully, I think we'll reach many people today that also will never feel alone.
I agree.
Something that comes up with a lot of illnesses, diseases, is stigmas, myths, and, falsehoods. What are some of the stigmas that you have encountered, Kimberly? Maybe you had it prior to getting diagnosed, or maybe you hadn't. But what are some of the stigmas that really need to be kind of squashed when it comes to Parkinson's disease?
Sure. So I think when people associate Parkinson's disease, they think of probably two things. Everyone knows about Michael J. Fox, so they probably think about him, or they think about old men sort of in their 80s shaking. And there's a whole army of people in between that are really different. Many more women are being diagnosed with Parkinson's. And many people, unfortunately, younger age have been diagnosed with Parkinson's. I'm technically on the borderline for young onset Parkinson's. I was diagnosed at 51. I think the cutoff is 50. So I consider myself maybe middle-aged Parkinson's. I don't know. But there's lots of people that are out there in the community doing well. Some people never even realize I have Parkinson's. I have been diagnosed for about 4.5 years now, but I'm pretty good at hiding my symptoms when I want to, and only people who are really looking notice. So you may know people that have Parkinson's and you don't even realize it. A lot of people don't want to disclose, especially at work, because they're nervous about being, quite frankly, discriminated against, fired before they need to be retired, So there's a lot of us out there, and unfortunately, we don't know what's causing it, but there's a thought that part of it is environmental, and they're predicting that this is going to be the next pandemic and really put a real burden on our healthcare system if we can't find a cure.
Well, and just before we go back to George, it seems lately, and since George and I become such good friends, I've learned about a lot of people that I otherwise wouldn't have known or realized that were diagnosed with Parkinson's. I'm thinking of like Bernie Kosar, Brett Favre, who just publicly came out the other day. You know, are there different types of Parkinson's? And what I mean by that, Kimberly, I'm assuming you weren't an NFL football player or an NHL hockey player, so you probably weren't having any trauma to your head. Those individuals and these athletes, they already try to contribute it to their sports careers from having too many hits to the head and things like that. So what makes that Parkinson's different than, say, your Parkinson's? Like, because to me, that seems like a stigma where if you play football, you're going to have Parkinson's, but if you didn't play football, you shouldn't have Parkinson's.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, and I'm going to answer it kind of in two parts.
Yeah,
So
please.
there's various things that we know that cause Parkinson's. So we know one thing that can cause Parkinson's is hits. We also know that if you're exposed to certain toxins, you're more likely to have Parkinson's. There's some Parkinson's that has a genetic link. So I've gone through the analysis of these things for me, and I have none of these things. I didn't play sports as a child. I was into singing and acting. The environmental toxins that they talk about being exposed to, I don't think I was exposed to them, although I guess you never know what you're exposed to. But they talk about people having well water more likely to have it. And we didn't have a well as a kid. We had city water. I have city water all my life. I took a genetic test, and it doesn't appear that I have a genetic type of Parkinson's, although I am Jewish, and there is a link of Parkinson's that is related to the Jewish community. I don't have that one. I have something else. So I think some people can link their Parkinson's to certain things, and other people are like me, and we just don't know. The other thing I would say is that when you're saying, are there several types of Parkinson's? Since they kind of don't know what's causing Parkinson's, they're not really sure, but it's thought to be that this is probably several different versions of Parkinson's out there, maybe many, many, because when they often say when you meet one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's.
Sure.
No two people have exactly the same symptoms. And so you can't, it's not like someone with a broken arm that you could see the cast, everyone has the same cast, or high blood pressure. You could take a test, everyone has the same, options of treatment or something like that. A lot of Parkinson's is mostly diagnosed through exclusion of other things like ALS and MS, bodies even. And then also a doctor just observing, really a movement disorder specialist or sometimes a neurologist just observing your gait, your tremor, things like that, and making that diagnosis of Parkinson's. So there's a really, compared to a lot of other diseases, there hasn't been much great progress in Parkinson's. I I don't want to diminish what's being done, but the treatment of Parkinson's 50 years ago is pretty much this same gold, what they call the gold ribbon treatment now, gold star treatment now. It's levodopa carbidopa. It's the same drug we've been using for almost 50 years. There really hasn't been a lot more. Now they recently found a biomarker, and that's really promising because I think that's going to lead to other results. And I'm certainly not diminishing any of the science that's going out there. I'm participating in several clinical trials myself, and they're doing amazing things. But like from a patient perspective, what has changed in the treatment and diagnosis over the last 50 years? And not a ton.
Real quick, because I know I said I would only ask two, but one of your answers spurred one other question. Then we'll go to George. I have a tremendous group of friends who are also Jewish, and I don't look at them any differently than I would my non-Jewish friends. I don't put labels on people like that. But your answer triggered this question. Do they know why the Jewish population is more susceptible to developing Parkinson's than another population? I've never heard that before, Kimberly.
It has to do with being Ashkenazi Jewish, which is associated with people coming from Europe. And there's a lot of other disease that's associated with that. For instance, the BRCA cancer, breast cancer gene, that is associated with being Ashkenazi Jewish. So there's many diseases associating, and just like sickle cell is associated with being African American, there's many different diseases that are associated with different ethnicities. And I'm not sure there's why really.
So it's more European Jewish population than say like the Israeli Jewish population?
Well, which is most of the Jewish population.
Sure, right.
In the United States that leads emanates from Europe.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I had no idea. George, we'll go back to you.
Yeah, I'm hoping it is. I mean, I'm not hoping, but I feel it might be more environment, but I'm Jewish and I fit into what you both just said. So, and my mother unfortunately passed due to it. So you never know, unfortunately, what my future brings, but we continue to fight no matter what. And my last question, first I want to thank you, Kimberly, for joining us today. It's an honor to always, catch up and talk. And everyone, we have a big project coming in a little while, and we're actually we're writing a book with another incredible advocate who has Parkinson's, and it's literally going to be on the legal system and Parkinson's because we all felt there's not enough information out there. And I also don't want everyone to have, no offense to my legal community, but I don't want you to have to, unless it's pro bono or volunteer, to pay $300 an hour or more just to get a little advice. So I really think this book, number one, I don't see it anywhere. There's nothing like this out in the world. So it's very exciting. So we'll be, in touch more and share that with everyone listening. But for my final question is caregiving. That's what, again, brings us together today. Who helps you at the times of struggle? We've spoken about this before, but I was wondering if you have a caregiver or some support for some of the tougher times, and just wanted to always thank them and send our love and support to them for also supporting you.
Yeah, so I'm really, really lucky in that I have a big, broad caregiving system. I have a wonderful husband and two sons that have been there for me for this. A new daughter-in-law who has been very supportive. My parents are still alive. They certainly are still caregivers. They've been in their 80s to me. And my sister and my brother-in-law, my niece and nephew. And I just have really wonderful, supportive colleagues that I work with. They've been so supportive of me doing this. I'm doing this on work time today, talking to you. And they're always supportive of me getting the word out, anything about disability advocacy. So that's part of the mission of the work that we do. And friends, I just have wonderful, wonderful friends that I sing with, friends that I attend theater with, friends that I, keep active with. And I think, having such a big support system and staying engaged socially is one of the biggest reasons that I've been able to live well and stay so positive while, dealing with the barriers that this disease may bring to me.
And I'll close this out. And Kimberly, thank you so much for taking time out of your workday, and thank you to your employer, because I would like to see more employers be supportive of caregivers and people going through illness and understanding and getting the word out. So thank you to that. My last question is really, when you're having a bad day, like we all have bad days, and they creep up sometimes expectedly and unexpectedly, what is one piece of advice that you have found helpful for you to kind of push through that bad day and look at the positive and not look at the negative or what the prognosis might be, because family caregivers are taking care of their loved ones and they're dealing with a lot of the same issues that we've dealt with as family caregivers and what you might be dealing with. What piece of advice would you offer to them that maybe is helpful for you when you're having a bad day?
Yeah, I would say, especially for Parkinson's disease, it's not a linear disease. I sort of describe it as a roller coaster. You could have a bad day one day, and the next day you could feel really great and feel like much more like yourself. So that's one thing. Take one day at a time. And I would also say there's always reasons to be hopeful and thankful. Life is such a wonderful blessing that we've been given. You know, if you're lucky enough to have friends and family, to wake up in a warm place, to have food to eat, there's always something to be thankful for. And sometimes, even when you're in that worst kind of down place, having some gratitude and then having some hope. And I have a lot of hope for the future. I have a lot of hope through doing this work, through advocating for people with Parkinson's, through the science, which is amazing, that there will be a cure or at least better treatments in my future. And all of that gets me through the day.
Well, thank you, Kimberly. George, always good to see you, my friend. Thank you for what you're doing at Together for Sharon. And we look forward to seeing everybody here again next time at the Care Advocates.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kimberly. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us again here today at the Care Advocates, where we're advocating for you. We want to also say thank you again to our guest, Kimberly Jacobsen. We look forward to seeing you again here next month.